Select the Music Timeline button in the menu, then stamp one in the scene with R2 or X. Press Circle to unequip the timeline gadget from your imp. Open up the timeline canvas with L1 and X. This timeline is empty, ready to be filled with music. The columns on the timeline represent musical bars. This timeline is 8 bars long. We'll need more space than that, so hover over the right edge and grab it with X. Extend the timeline to 16 bars. Now let's add a music clip to the timeline. Press square to open the sound menu. Find the search button and select it with X. Its icon is the magnifying glass. When you search in sound mode, there are 4 options for finding different sounds. Select Search Music Clips with X. This is the Dreamiverse. Here you can find music made by other dream shapers. Well, usually you can, but for this tutorial, I've made a collection of elements for you to use. That's what this cluster is. Select it with X to open it. It contains a selection of music clips, which you can use to build your own arrangements. Use the right stick to zoom in and out, and the left stick to move around. I've grouped the clips into different categories. Let's start with a basic melody. That's this group of clips. Hover over the clips to hear a preview of how they sound. Find one that you like, then select it with X to equip it to your imp. I'm using the clip Nostalgia Bells. Your imp will now be holding a gadget containing your selected clip. If you hover over the timeline, the gadget should snap to the canvas and reveal the whole clip. Place the clip at the start of the timeline and stamp it with R2 or X. Clips on a timeline will snap to the bars and to other clips. This will help you line them up. Click R3 to listen to the timeline. In the next step, we'll build up the track with some more clips. Click L3 to rewind time. Let's build on the melody by adding some chords. Go to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips again. Over here are some chord clips. Hover over the clips to preview them, then select one with X. I'm going with Suspended Pad, but you can make your own choice. Stamp your clip onto a new row of the timeline and snap it to the start. Click R3 to listen and notice how the clips play together in time. Click L3 to rewind. Now let's add some drums. Go back to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips. Find the drum clips in the collection. A drum beat can really change the feel of a track. I love these samba practice drums. Pick a drum clip you like, then stamp it onto the timeline under the melody and chords. Now click R3 to listen to how it sounds. All the clips in the collection are in the same time and key, so you can mix and match them easily. Click L3 to rewind. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit the length of your clips and how to add fades. When you hover over a clip on the timeline, you'll see dotted lines light up at the start and at the end of the clip. Move closer to the timeline so you can see them properly. These are trim handles. We can use them to change the length of a clip. Hover over the handle on the end of the drum clip, then hold R2 to grab it. These clips are loops, so you can extend the clip beyond its original length. All the clips in the collection can be extended in this way. Trim handles are really useful for arranging and remixing. They let you use just a section of a clip without having to edit the music notes inside. On top of the trim handle, you'll see a little coloured gizmo. Move in closer to see it properly. This is a fade handle. You can use it to fade the volume of a clip in or out. It works just like the trim handle. Grab the gizmo with R2 and move your imp left or right to create a fade. Try adding a fade out on the chord clip so it drops off gradually. Drag it out further. For a longer fade. Now click R3 to run time. Doesn't that sound cool? You may To make the track play constantly in the scene, we need to set the timeline to loop. We can do this in the Timeline's Tweak menu. Hover over a blank area of the timeline, hold L1 and press square to open its Tweak menu. In here, we can change the timeline settings. Find the playback mode section. There are 3 options. Once means the timeline will play once all the way through when it's powered on. Sustain means the timeline will pause when it's powered off, then resume once it's powered on. Loop means the timeline will play repeatedly while it's powered on. Hover over the loop icon and press X to change the playback mode. You can also change the playback speed in the Tweak menu. Hover over the playback speed slider and hold X to grab it. Now move your imp to the left or right to adjust the value. Click R3 to hear your adjustments live. You can also adjust the slider by hovering over it and pressing the up or down directional buttons. See how it sounds when it's slowed down or sped up a little. To close the Tweak menu, hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. You can also tweak music clips to make them loop. Just hover over them, hold L1 and press square to open their Tweak menus. You can also change their volume and tempo. Be careful changing the tempo, as your clips could go out of time with the others. We've made a cool piece of music, but you can carry on adding more clips if you want to. Maybe you heard something in a tutorial collection that would sound awesome in your arrangement. Try trimming and looping tracks. See what you can come up with. If you need extra space, you can extend the timeline by grabbing the edges with X. All the clips we've used in this tutorial come from the Media Molecule Music Collection. The collection contains lots of music clips you can use, as well as some complete tracks. Look for it in the Dreamiverse next time you're making music in sound mode. Once you've finished, switch over to play mode and listen to your track in the scene. To end the tutorial, just press Options and select the Exit Creation button. Are you ready to get those creative juices flowing? This tutorial's all about making your creations beautiful. Now, this is Connie's front garden. But what's this? It's had all the colour, style and magic sucked out of it. But not to worry, Connie. We can help make the garden pretty again with the power of dreams. Just to start you off, all the lighting's already done. We can learn more about that later. And because I'm ever your servant, I've also grouped some of these objects just for you. It'll make editing them quicker and easier. So what does the garden need? Well, it could do with some colour, texture and movement. Luckily, the coat, style and effects modes are the perfect tools to do that. They don't create new objects, they modify existing sculptures and paintings. And they work on groups. With just a little practice, you can become a master of them all. So let's start by adding some colour with the tint tool. Open the assembly menu with the square button and go to the modes menu. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The tint tool is in coat mode. It has an icon that looks like a pot of paint being spilled. Select it by pressing the X button. As you can see, the assembly menu has now been replaced with the coat menu. In the top row, you'll find options and helpers. Along the bottom, you'll find the tools. Now, which colour to use? Open the Colours menu in the top row of icons. These are colour groups. You can expand a colour group with X. Each group contains more shades that you can choose from. I'm going to find a green for the foliage, but if green's not your thing, you can experiment. Is the menu too long? You can scroll it by grabbing it with R2. Pick a shade, or if you fancy a more painterly or organic look, choose the tumbler colour at the end of the group. That will apply a random shade that changes as you work. When you've chosen a colour, you're ready to go to the next step. To add colour to our scene, we'll use the tint tool, which has an icon like an airbrush. You can manually select it in the Tools menu. But in coat mode, choosing a colour from the Colours menu equips the tint tool automatically. See the airbrush icon on the tip of your imp. The tint tool recolours objects, either tinting or completely covering their original colour. Just press and hold R2 to tint the objects at the tip of your imp. No need to select or scope into anything. The rounded clumps look a bit dreary in this scene. Let's add some colour. You can see that the longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint gets. And with a tumbler colour selected, it will cycle through different shades. If you make a mistake, you can undo using the left directional button. Or set your tool to subtract and you can detint. How do you do that? If you press triangle while the tool is active, your imp will change to an outline. So now it will remove tint instead of adding it. And that works on pretty much all of the coat, style and effects tools. Just press triangle when they're equipped to make them subtractive. Try removing some colour using subtractive tint now. Just hold R2 over the object. And to make the tool additive again, press triangle. Now that you've got to grips with that, you can colour in the whole scene with the tint tool. Go wild! Use different colours to tint the path, rocks, river, grass, trees, and the little cottage. The Colours menu has all the colours you need. Just open a colour group and pick a shade, or the tumbler colour. Take some time to colour your scene. When you're done, move on to the next step. Good job. Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful! Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colours menu in Coat mode, you'll find Find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finishes before using R2. Remember Wonderful! Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and Circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finishes before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the Flow tool. Leave Coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the Flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the Flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the Flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and Circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flecks to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the Glow tool. So head back to the Modes menu and into Coat mode. The Glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X. Then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive. Then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the Glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the mode's menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. In this lesson, I'll show you how to sculpt your own objects from scratch, which will come in handy because Cuthbert's having a meltdown. Again. Fortunately, we can use the tools in Sculpt mode to help get Connie to Cuthbert and escort him to safety. Go to the Assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the Modes menu with the X button. Select Sculpt mode with X. Its icon has some 3D shapes on it. Every time you enter Sculpt mode from the Modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and grayed out. This is to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. When you first enter Sculpt mode, the Shapes menu will open automatically and the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. Try smearing a shape now by holding R2 and moving your imp around. It's great for making organic forms. Now that's out of your system, undo all of it by using the left directional button. By using this tool, we'll help Connie get across the first gap. Move your view a bit closer to the action, looking side on at the space between the platforms. Make sure you can see the platforms and that your imp can reach them. We want to build an organic structure for Connie to walk on, so let's pick an appropriate shape. Select one from the Shapes menu, and you'll see it on the end of your imp. Use the up and down directional buttons to scale it to an appropriate size. While you have a shape on your imp, you can use the grab cam to zoom in and out. Just hold R1 and use the left stick. Now position your imp next to the platform on one side of the gap. Then hold down R2 and use the motion sensor function or the left stick to smear your shape in the gap so that Connie can walk on it. If you want to have another go at it, just undo using the left directional button. Feel free to press and let go of R2 as many times as you want. Each press will create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Try holding L2 as you sculpt and use the left and right sticks to rotate the shape. Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. The cool thing is, sculpts are automatically physical, so they can be walked on by puppets like Connie immediately. When you want to try it out, switch to play mode in the options menu and get Connie to walk around on your sculpture. When you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode and proceed to the next step. What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. When you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in Sculpt mode are the same as in Assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. Now try moving, rotating, and scaling your individual shapes. If you want to smear some shapes again, just go to the Sculpt Tools menu and select the Smear Shape tool. The icon is a row of intersecting squares. Now you can play around at sculpting with different shapes. Don't forget that you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out, you can scope back into your sculpture by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to colour your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default colour, but you can sculpt with any colour you like. If you're in assembly mode, hover over your sculpture with your imp, then hold L1 and press X to scope back into it. Next, head to the Colours section in the Sculpt menu and press X over a colour group to see the different shades. Choose a colour, any one you like. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the colour you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that colour, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also colour shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Go to the Sculpt menu and open the Tools section with X. Then select the spray paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint colour appear on it. Hold R2 to apply the spray paint to the shapes. You can try out different colours and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. If you want to make it easier to keep your imp on the surface of the sculpture, you can use the Surface Snap guide. You can find Surface Snap in the Sculpt Guides menu. Select it with X to turn it on. There's a Guides menu in every mode, though not all guides are available everywhere. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. The Coat, Style and Effects tutorial has more on finishes if you're curious. By now, you should have an organic-looking form, and it will be whatever colour your imagination conjured up. If you switched on Surface Snap, switch it off in the Guides menu before continuing. Just select the button with X to turn it off. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to make the tool subtractive. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already with L1 and X. When the Smear Shape tool is equipped to your imp, you can press triangle to make it subtractive. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp becomes an outline too. You can now use the Smear tool to cut into your sculpture. Try using different shapes to see what effect they have. For a really cool effect, try subtracting with a different coloured shape on your imp. How good is that? You can switch the tool between additive and subtractive by pressing triangle. Why not play around with the tools a bit and try to make a dramatic or interesting looking form? When you're happy with its shape, go into play mode and see if you can get Connie across it. If you need to edit it, just come back to edit mode via the options menu. Don't forget to scope back into your sculpture using L1 and X. When Connie has successfully crossed the first gap in play mode, switch back to edit mode, then go to the next step. Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. So go to the Assembly menu and select Sculpt in the Modes menu. This will create a new sculpture. Now let's practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap. To help us build a neater bridge, open the Guides section of the Sculpt menu. In Guides, switch on Grid Snap by pressing X over it. You'll see a number appear next to the button. That's how big the grid squares will be. You'll notice the white dotted grid in the scene. The spacing of the dots shows the tightness of the grid. They will change orientation depending on your point of view. We'll leave it on the default setting for now. You can experiment with it later. Now try making a colourful sculpture using the Smear and Move tools and the Colours menu. This'll just be a practice one, so don't spend too long on it. We'll delete it and make an even better one in a minute. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shapes neat and straight this time. That's because Grid Snap is active. It makes your tools and objects snap to the grid. It also helps you rotate precisely. Try it out using L2 or the touchpad. With Grid Snap on, objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. You can rotate the shape on the end of your imp before you stamp it, or use the Move tool to rotate shapes that are already placed. When you're comfortable sculpting with Grid Snap, continue to the next step. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check the Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen color and shape. The Mirror Guide will always center on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the center of the gap to enable the Mirror Guide. Then smear your shape from the center over to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. You'll see that your sculpt is mirrored, so you only have to make half of the bridge, and it'll be nice and symmetrical, leaving you to focus on making it fabulous. Carry on sculpting and carving your bridge until you're happy. Test it in play mode. And when Connie is over the second gap, return to edit mode via the options menu. When you're back in edit mode, switch off the Mirror Guide. You can also switch off Grid Snap if you want, before moving on to the next step. Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. For that, we're going to use the mighty Stamp tool. First, we'll need to create a new sculpture by going to Sculpt mode via the Modes menu. Now that you're in Sculpt mode, make sure you've switched off the Mirror Guide before you continue. You'll be equipped with the Smear Shape tool by default, so you'll need to switch to the Stamp Shape tool. You can find Stamp Shape in the Sculpt mode Tools menu, next to Smear Shape. Its icon is a simple square. You can quickly switch between the Stamp and Smear tools using L1 and Triangle. It's a bit like switching between additive and subtractive, but with L1 held down. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the Stamp Shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold R2 or X. This has additional benefits too, which you'll see later. Now select the cube in the Shapes menu, then stamp one at the side of the gap. We're almost there, Connie! Open the Sculpt Tools menu again, and this time pick the Stretch tool. Its icon is a double-ended arrow. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform. Press and hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice! Let go of R2 when you're done stretching. It's not a very exciting bridge right now, but I've got something great to customize it with soon. You can stretch any shape you've sculpted, regardless of what shape it is. Spheres, cones, and even donuts can be stretched. You can even stretch subtractive shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet. When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the Stamp Shape tool and not the Smear Shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one: Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped to shape your using. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one: Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the shape editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The blend amount slider affects how much the shape will blend with other shapes nearby. Try holding X on the slider and moving your imp up and down. This is how you get some truly amazing shapes. The hard blend toggle switches between hard and soft blends. Toggle between the two options with X to see the difference it makes. To close the shape editor, just press circle. Now have a play with your blendable shape. You can only blend shapes that are part of the same sculpture. So if you can't see any blending on your shape, scope into the sculpture with L1 and X. You can make some very cool shapes using blending. Try making subtractive blends too. Experiment with different shapes and blends on your bridge. Make it really fancy. You can jump back into the shape editor with L1 and square. You can use the shape editor in any of the sculpting tools. Try using soft blend with the spray paint tool. To exit the shape editor and return to sculpting, just press circle. When you've got the hang of the shape editor and you're happy with your bridge, try it out in play mode and get Connie to Cuthbert. Take Connie through the door to finish the tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll master paint mode. Uh-oh. Looks like Connie's having a bad day. Cuthbert got a bit handy with the lawnmower and mucked up her garden. Sorry, Connie. Let's paint her a lovely new one in paint mode. So, to explain, everything you see in Dreams is made up of little splats called flecks. They can be big, loose and painterly, or small, tight and smooth. In paint mode, we deal with strokes, like real-life painting. Strokes are lines of flecks that you draw in 3D space using your imp. Let's make some now. Go to the Assembly menu. If it's closed, just press the square button to open it. Then open the Modes menu with X. It's this little group of icons. In the Modes menu, select Paint Mode. It has an icon with a paint squiggle. When you enter Paint Mode, you'll go straight into the Flex menu, and the Brush Flex tool will be equipped to your imp. See? There's a fleck on the tip of your imp. When you're painting, everything else goes blurry and black and white to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust the visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. Try pressing and holding R2 while you move your imp around. And look at that! You're painting. Your imp creates a paint stroke made of a trail of flecks. Try changing how hard you press R2 as you paint. With the Brush Fleck tool, changing the pressure on R2 affects how opaque the flecks are. So if you press R2 lightly, the flecks will be more transparent. Now press square to open the paint menu so that we can look at some new colours and finishes. Look at the top row of buttons in the paint menu to find them. As well as the Flex menu, which is already open, there are also menus for colours and finishes there. You can use these to change the colour and finish of your flecks. Practice with the Brush Flex tool and make as many strokes as you like. You can always undo any mistakes with the left directional button. Once you've got a feel for painting, continue to the next step. Was that fun? Now that you've made a gorgeous painting, hold L1 and press Circle to scope out of paint mode. It's just like scoping out of a group and works the same way for all creation modes. A painting is a single object created in paint mode, just like a sculpture is a single object created in sculpt mode. In assembly mode, you can move, scale, and rotate your painting. To edit the strokes in the painting, you can scope into it, just like you can with a group. Try scoping into the painting you just made. Hover over it, hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you scope into a painting, you will automatically be put back into paint mode and equipped with the Brush Fleck tool. Press Circle to unequip the Brush Fleck tool. Now you can use the Move tool on the individual strokes in the painting. You can scope out of the painting again with L1 and Circle. Do you fancy making some flowers for Connie's garden? Connie loves flowers. Let's start by making a leaf, and then we can work our way up to the petals. Delete your practice painting using triangle. Then enter paint mode in the Modes menu. Choose a colour and a finish from the paint menu. Then choose a fleck to paint with. Use the up and down directional buttons to adjust the size of the fleck. Now paint a simple stroke. Remember, the harder you press, the more opaque the flecks will be. If you want to take another shot at it, just undo with the left directional button and try again. When you're happy with your leaf, go to the next step. Next, let's paint a stalk. In the context menu, you'll see a button with a plus sign icon. Select this button to start a new painting. For the stalk, we'll use the Drawflex tool. Open the paint menu with square if it's closed, then select the Tools menu. The Drawflex tool icon is a pencil. Select it with X. Drawflex acts more like a pen than a paintbrush. The harder you press R2, the larger the stroke gets. So if you press gently, the stroke will be quite small. When you scale the Drawflex tool, the fleck will get much bigger. That's because it's showing you the maximum size of the fleck. When you stop scaling, it reverts back to the smallest size the fleck can be. When you press R2, select it with X. Drawflex acts more like a pen than a paintbrush. The harder you press R2, the larger the stroke gets. So if you press gently, the stroke will be quite small. When you scale the Drawflex tool, the fleck will get much bigger. That's because it's showing you the maximum size of the fleck. When you stop scaling, it reverts back to the smallest size the fleck can be. Try drawing a flower stalk with it. Have a few goes to practice. Adjust the pressure on R2 as you paint the stroke, so that the stalk tapers at the end. Don't worry about lining it up with the leaf though. We'll do that later. When you're happy with your stalk, continue to the next step. Now the exciting bit, the flower. In the context menu, select the Start New Painting button. By starting a new painting, the flower will be a separate object to the stalk. We're going to paint the petals with the Stamp Flex tool, plus a special ingredient. You can find Stamp Flex in the Paint Mode Tools menu. Select it